Hello, folks. This is the right-wing genius coming to you today from home base in Waco, Texas. And yes, I am in a courtroom. Now, we're going to have to make this quick because I'm not supposed to be in here. But all that aside, I wanted to talk about something. When I was up in Washington, one morning I saw this headline in the Washington Post. So I didn't read the story, but I thought it was interesting, um, and yet I didn't read it. Eventually I did, though. Turns out there is a much large, the story, that was just the tip of the iceberg. This is the full page spread on page 2. There's obviously a lot more there. Now, as I read the article, I noticed that they're claiming that Rubio misstated his family history and stuff. I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention, to be honest. But it didn't really seem like there was much there. Then, when I got back in town, I saw this Monday night.
The O'Reilly is on tonight. They won't find a single credible Cuban-American voice in Miami that will dispute that my parents were exiles.
Senator Marco Rubio responds to the Washington Post saying he was not truthful about his parents' odyssey from Cuba to America.
So I thought, well, maybe I ought to read that story. But I thought it was interesting. I wasn't really following the news when I was up in Washington. I thought, is this some big controversy? Turns out it's not, at least not to reasonable-minded people. Take a look at, basically what Rubio said on the O'Reilly factor.
And why do you think the Washington Post is making a big deal out of it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Obviously, this is reporters that have.
Did they call you
writing.
before they published the article?
Well, they actually published the article, then they interviewed me. And
so
then,
they didn't call you before?
Well, they may have called the office before, but they certainly posted the article before they interviewed me, and then he added some of my statements into it. But I think the bottom line is it misses the point. I don't need to embellish my narrative. My narrative is very simple. I am the son of exiles and of immigrants, and that has framed my political thought.
I, find his explanation to be plausible. It seems like, that should be the end of it, all right? I mean, granted, it must be a pretty big news story for O'Reilly to devote the entire A block to it. His is a pretty, he has a pretty big audience. And so, anyway, I didn't really think much of it. I got finals coming up, so I'm not really focusing that much on political stories, but it seemed like, there wasn't much there. And then, actually, Britt Hume in the next segment mentioned this.
Would you have run that story on page 1 if you were the editor?
If I were the editor, I would have run the story, but I certainly wouldn't have run it on page 1. I might have run it on an inside page, and I would have been sure I had whatever his full explanation was. When you add it up, it has to do with whether his parents were, whether they fled Castro or whether they didn't go back because Castro was there. I think it's a minor distinction, and I think it's not worthy of the play it got. And I think in that sense, it was a cheap shot. And it's been, the Miami Herald wrote a very strong story, basically rebutting it, which is an unusual thing for another newspaper to do, particularly a liberal newspaper. So I think the Post ended up with a kind of a black eye on this one.
Okay.
So it sounds like the story is pretty much it's a not a big deal, right? Well, a few days later, after the story's run, after Rubio's appeared on O'Reilly and kind of, basically explained everything, I see this.
New details about Senator Marco Rubio's family history have emerged, and they don't help the senator. Last week, the Washington Post reported that Rubio's parents did not flee Castro's Cuba, as he said, but left years earlier. And now we learned that his parents apparently didn't intend to return to Cuba. They planned to stay in the U.S.
Now, those of you who have been watching my videos know I don't really think that much of Chris Matthews, but I found, basically, just just take a look. Listen to this.
So let's take a look now at what's going on here. He initially criticized for portraying that his parents fled after Castro took control of Cuba. In fact, as of Friday of last week, his Senate biography read as follows. This is, to me, the damning information. Not just that he says it verbally, but they put it out in an official document in the Senate, in his office. Quote, in 1971, Marco was born in Miami to Cuban-born parents who came to America following Fidel Castro's takeover. That is not true, Alex. They put out something that was not true with absolute clarity. It wasn't a difference of years, 59 versus 56, but now they're putting out the biography as of now when they got caught. They've been caught with the revelations about the timing of their move to the United States. It now reads, quote, Marco was born in Miami in 1971 to Cuban exiles who first arrived in the United States in 1956. So he dropped the claim only after he got caught.
Now, is that not, I mean, that sounds pretty damning the way he put it. But actually, what I want to show you, what you need to focus on is this. Listen to this.
This clarification, this revision of his life story, of his biography, is only coming to light because the Washington Post nailed him.
Okay, Chris, a couple of things. First, I wouldn't say they nailed him, but more importantly, that is a damning accusation. And I would like to know, Chris Matthews, what is your proof? What proof do you have that he only changed the things, that he only corrected this because he got caught? And he didn't really even get caught on anything more than just getting dates wrong. It seems entirely plausible that this entire time, Rubio, believed that his parents came to America a few years later than they actually had. He only now found out about this. He corrected the thing. I mean, and watch the guy from Politico try and explain that point, albeit less articulately. Watch him try and make a sound, coherent point and get shot down by Chris Matthews.
The most generous interpretation of what's going on here is that he is actually learning some of the specifics along with the rest of us.
Whoa, that's where I don't agree with you. That's too generous. How could he have grown up in a family of, quote, exiles and not have his parents ever explain to him what it was like when Castro took over? Just answer that question. How can they ever say to their kid, we're exiles, and never once say, in answer to the kid's question, or just generally as parents do over the dinner table, you should have seen Castro when he came in. We thought he was going to be good. He turned out to be a commie. He started killing people. He executed 600 people the first couple of weeks. Why did that conversation never occur?
Okay. That is a question you should be directing to Senator Rubio. And on these types of shows, if someone contacts a politician, or just anyone in general they're talking about, but in this case, if they wanted to get a statement from Marco Rubio, then they would have at least contacted his office and invited him on the show. And if he had refused, then they would mention that. That's what these talk show hosts do. If they want somebody on their show, then they invite him, and then they, if they don't come on, the person doesn't come on, then the host mentions on the air, there's an open invitation, or we've invited so-and-so to come on the show, he has declined. Chris Matthews never said that throughout the entire segment. He never stated that he had invited Marco Rubio on, which indicates to me he probably, they probably didn't. And if they didn't even contact Senator Rubio's office, then that indicates to me Chris Matthews probably, he's not very interested in truth. And I think it's ridiculous, that it's really pathetic. The only reason I'm doing this story is because I thought it was weird that I just happened to see this article on the front page of the Washington Post while I was up in Washington last week. Didn't think much of it at the time, and then the night after I get back from Washington, D.C., there it is. It's the lead story on the O'Reilly factor. So I mean, it would be, it's just really, it just goes to underscore how, I'm not sure what it is about Marco Rubio that seems to get the left so riled up that Matthews and his like feel the need to actually trumpet a piece that has already been discredited. I mean, this is they're trumpeting a news story that has already been discredited. It's so pathetic, and I can only think, one, they're not very self-aware. Second, there must be something about Marco Rubio that drives them to these absurd attacks. I mean, whenever... yeah. Hey, I just had to interrupt here because I thought of something better to say right after I had left, which tends to happen a lot. But I wanted to mention how this line of crap from Chris Matthews is really just the latest example of a common behavior exhibited by left-wing hatchet men. And that is, they make an insulting, disparaging, and oftentimes baseless accusation against a high-profile public figure, and then actually act as though they've created a rebuttable presumption that the public figure has a duty to rebut with hardcore evidence. You remember how during the 2008 campaign, Andrew Sullivan basically he insinuated, he actually he did more than that. He pretty much flat out accused Sarah Palin of pretending that Trigg was her child when in fact he was actually Bristol Palin's son, something like that. Just total lunacy, and really insulting attack, not just on Sarah Palin, but really on her family, her children. Just awful. But that isn't even the worst part. The worst part is he actually called on her to produce evidence rebutting that, to produce evidence to the contrary. And that's the attitude of people like this on the left. For those of you who think that the right is full of so many hate mongers and people who are just interested in attacking liberals and Democrats, I honestly cannot think of anyone on the right who does this. At least certainly not anyone on the right who has the let's say the stature that Chris Matthews does on the left. I don't know. If you can think of one, then please let me know. But that's all. I just had to point that out. Well, we've still got some footage from my trip to Washington, D.C. that we haven't uploaded, or that I haven't uploaded yet. I'll probably be posting some more videos in a week or two after I get done with finals. So this will be my last installment for a little while. Check out my website. Check out my blog. Won't be posting anything new for a little while, but there's a lot of articles on there to read. So read the articles and comment on them. Anyway, until next time, don't mess with the right-wing genius. And go Rangers!